Yeah.
All right, we're back. It's COMP3025, Mobile and Pervasive Computing in the Winter of 2016 semester, week 1, lesson 1, part 2 actually. It says part 1, but I made a mistake. It's part 2, and it'll record multiple versions of part 1, and then I'll just modify it later. So we talked about kind of our plan in the last video. So if you want to look at the last video, if you forgot the plan or you want to know what's happening, you can certainly look at video 1 for that. I want to get into this stuff, and again, I have kind of a condensed version of chapter 1 in my PowerPoint presentation that I put up on Blackboard for you if you want to follow along. The one thing I want to do is, so I'm going to hit this PowerPoint. I'm not going to read every slide, obviously, right? We're going to kind of use it as a backdrop, and there might be a little bit of instructions for us to follow when we put together our first little simple app. But I think the first thing I want you to do with this is let's do a little bit of playing around with the environment. So let's bring up Xcode for a second. I think this is the first piece that I'd ask you to do. So here's Xcode. If you don't have it up already, notice that in Xcode, as soon as you bring it up, this little quick menu comes up to launch your stuff. You could do it 2 ways. You could start off with a new project here, create a new project in Xcode. You can certainly do that here. And you can also do it through your menus. So if you notice, once you bring up Xcode on the Mac, you always have this menu that's detached from the application, like this, right? So here, if you notice, if I go File, New, and if I go Project, that's what you could do it from there. And you can also do it from here, right? So that's how you start off your project. So let's start off a new project. We're going to call this, kind of an example project for us. When it comes up, you're going to see this menu of stuff. Depending on which version of Xcode you'll have different options. Now, the version I've loaded or installed for you in your VM should give you all the same options that I have. One thing I didn't do in your VM is download and install your documentation, right? That's built into Xcode, and there's a reason for that because it's another couple gigs, and I was kind of space limited. So you can certainly do it now if you wanted to load in your documentation later on, but it is an extra couple gigs of stuff to load up and I'll show you where that is as we go. So there's different options, different templates that you start off with on iOS. And notice that you can do an iOS application, you can do a framework or library. Obviously, watchOS and tvOS and OS X native are here as well. If you want to do an OS X application, and there's different templates that start off, right? So we're going to start off with an iOS application, obviously, and we're going to go with a single view application. That's the first one we're going to create here together just to play around, and also we're going to follow the book. All right? So let's do that. So let's create a little iOS app. I'm going to click Next. Your product name. So we're going to make this an example app or demo app, right? So if I was to call this COMP3025, let's do this for the first time, and I'm going to call this demo. Notice how my bundle identifier changes. Now I'm using my company name, com.acrotech, as an example, right? But let's use, for here, we can use com.Georgian College, and that's what I would ask you to do when we're here. So here's Georgian College, right? It's reverse domain namespacing is what we use when we create Android applications and iOS applications, right? Because what this does is it creates a unique bundle identifier for the App Store, right? So as long as no one else takes your company name, whatever it is, then if you create an application like COMP3025 demo, and if it was a unique company name, it would be a unique product for the App Store. That's how they separate it. Okay, language is Swift. You could also choose Objective-C when you make iPhone or iOS devices, still, if you wanted to do that. And typically, we can program, if I select Universal here, then that means I can, when I write this app, it'll work both on iPhone and iPad, right? That's what it means. Or actually, it could also work for theoretically for tvOS as well, if you wanted to go there, because you can convert it. For now, we're going to build, in this course, all of our stuff we're going to make is for iPhone. And the reason for that is it's going to reduce some of the overhead in terms of what we're going to be doing. If we were to make universal apps, it comes with a different, kind of a different layout inside of our Xcode, in Xcode. So click iPhone. We're not going to be focusing on unit tests or core data or UI tests. So we're going to unclick these. So if they're clicked, unclick them. Uncheck them. Okay, and click Next.
They're unchecked by default.
There you go. And so now it's going to ask you where to put your stuff. I've got a kind of an Xcode projects folder on my desktop, and that's where I'm going to save everything. And I'm just going to click kind of continue on the bottom. And of course, my little toolbar cut off the bottom of my screen. For now, what I'm going to do just to make it a little easier is I'm going to undock I want to hide my dock on the bottom so I can see so it kind of gives me a little bit more room. All right, so when you first kick off with Xcode, one thing to notice is your screen, and it's kind of weird. It's like, if you've never used Visual Studio before, you don't know where everything is, right? So from an orientation perspective, and it actually says this in the PowerPoints, if you actually look at the PowerPoints, you can see that there's different panes for different things, right? For example, this is our project pane, and in our project pane, you're gonna have a list of your projects. Things to note, what you see here in your project pane for your files may not match what's on the actual operating system. So because what Xcode does is it uses metadata to kind of decorate your project a little bit to make it easier for you to manage. An example of this would be any blue folder that you see on Xcode. You'll notice that those are hard-coded folders that probably will appear in your operating system. And the yellow folders, anything you see in yellow, are just group folders, right, that are used for organizational purposes, right? So if I want to organize my app delegate and my view controller, as an example, if I want to organize those two in their own group, I mean, I could certainly create a group here to organize these within. So if I kind of select those two things, and as an example, and I can create new group, right? And I can say new group from selection, which is what I want to do, right? I can do that, and I can say, well, I'm going to call this, my group. I can call it whatever group I want. You can group your stuff up like this, right? And notice how both app delegate and view controller is here, but it won't affect the way your application runs, right? It's not like you're putting them in an actual physical folder, so it won't mess up your pathing or anything like that. It's simply for you to organize. So let's say, for example, I'm using the whole model view controller methodology, that design pattern that we use for most devices now, and most I would say, when we're in our development practice, model view controller. Maybe I want to have all my controllers in a group, right? It's not a separate folder, but I can hide or collapse those groups. So I can say all my controllers in one group, all my view, my models and stuff in another group, and so on. And I can kind of partition it that way. Now, what if I want to take stuff out of the group? What do? Well, I can actually take these two folders, or these two actual files, .swift, and I can just pull them out. And now my group is empty. Right, so all I've done is pull them out here, and I can delete my group, not a problem. Right, so my group is gone. Right, so things to note on the left-hand side here. Other things to note: if I click on any one of these, again, this is your project window. In the middle, this is your editor window, and over here, this is your inspector on the right. Right, depending on what you're clicking on, and again, there's these two buttons on the right-hand side here. And there's also these other tabs on the top here on your project window. Depending on what you click on, you get a different set of, it's context sensitive to what you see on the right-hand side in your inspector, right? So an example is I'm clicked on app delegate.swift, and I'm here. I've also got this checked right here. This is the tab that I'm in. I'm in the project navigator. If you hover over, that's what it is, right? And over here in the inspector, there's two folders. One of them is the file inspector, and the other one is kind of our quick help. Remember, I told you there's no quick help because I haven't downloaded your help files, right? From a space perspective, I'll show you where to get that later on today, because this is part of our orientation. Okay, but you can also see what our path looks like. So here's COMP3025 demo. That's our project name. Here's our main folder, which is the organizational folder we have, our group, right? Then we're looking at app.delegate.swift, right, as an example, and this is our Swift file. So let's take a look at this for a second, what it gives us right away. You should see, what does it say, student, right here when you guys log in? Right, because that's the name of the account that I made for you guys for this particular virtual machine, student, right? There is no login as an example for this. But if you're working with your own machine, it would show your name, right? So this is kind of cool. It kind of gives you a little bit of this header information right from the get-go. We're importing UIKit here, right? And UIKit is the SDK that we use to do UIs for iOS apps. If I was going to do something with games, I probably would have also import GameKit and SpriteKit, right? If I was going to do 2D and 3D games, if I was going to do that. So there's a ton of libraries that Apple's already written for you to help you write applications. I'll tell you right now that we're probably not going to touch app delegate for this particular day, and not for a while. And the reason for that is because we're not going to touch this too much because it's the flow of our application. In fact, if anything, if we kick off this application for the first time, each of these functions that you see here, these methods, will trigger upon execution of the application. There's an execution order, right, if you will, or a loop, an event loop that happens for all applications, right? So if you look here, the application method, right, is got inside of it other methods that it's asking for. For example, here's my application will resign active. That's a trigger. That's actually an event that will trigger, right? Same thing with this one. Application did enter background. When the application enters the background, this event will fire, right? So these are all the application events that are basically put out here as stubs that we can override, or we can, kind of put our own code in, and they're all required in app delegate. So the two files that you require for when you create iOS applications from the very first time, hint, hint, this is going to come up on your test next week, is appdelegate.swift and viewcontroller.swift. Those are the two files that you're going to see and that you need at a minimum when you create iOS applications, okay? Those two. So viewcontroller.swift is where we're going to do our work today, right? Yeah.
Turn line numbering on.
Your number?
Line numbering.
Oh yeah. Oh, you guys don't have line numbers? Oh, that's terrible. So you're going to go. Let's try this. Get that done. Thank you for that, Rich. If you go to Preferences, Xcode Preferences, right? And if I go to text editing, right in the middle, and I can click on line numbers. Not a problem. Right. So that's something that should have been. Sorry, I forgot to do that. I should have done that by default. Huh? What? Are you saying it's bad? I forgot. Sorry, did my best.
Next time.
Yeah, actually, since we're here, since Rich got me to get this, I was going to do this anyway. But let's take a look and see what's up here for preferences. One is our general preferences, right? So, for example, you can assign general preferences to the way that, in terms of warnings and so on, you can set that up. Accounts. This is what we're going to work in here a little bit with accounts. And one of them is, if you notice, I'm turned into this Georgian College admin account, and I'm part of a team, right? As an example, that I use for iOS development, right? Now I'm going to include you because I have developer access for our Georgian College thing, right? And I'm going to give you access as agents so you can create iOS apps for this semester, right? And so that your ID here and student, and I'm not sure how it's going to affect you. It's one thing we didn't look at because you're not logged in as yourself. I'm not sure if I just have to put in student, or if you have to change this every time when you log in. Because right now, if you notice, my Apple ID is here. So if you don't have an Apple ID, and you're going to need one to sign up as a developer, so please get an Apple ID for yourself. It's free to get. And then I can use that Apple ID. It's usually some kind of email address that I can send your credentials to. Because you're going to have to log in here as an example with your Apple ID. So that's kind of something I have to think about that. I don't know how. What does it say there for you when you go in there? Is it me? Yeah. Good.
Oh, I don't have one.
Good. Yes.
Will the license expire?
No.
So once we put it on our.
So I'll probably won't touch it again until next time I do this semester. So you have you pretty much have the whole year.
How do we split the profits?
Well, it's going to all go to Georgian College because if you're a Georgian College developer, then it's theoretically it's all for practice and learning, right? It's a learning account. But you could deploy Apple applications on your phone if you have an Apple a phone or some kind of an iPad. You could do that. So later on, we'll do this kind of, again, this is a kind of another headache we're going to do on another day. It's going to take almost the whole day to set this up properly. I'll be honest with you. Not the whole 3 hours, but there's a good portion of time we'll need for that. Okay, so that's one. Behaviors is another one. Again, what happens when your build starts? Do you want to play a sound? You can customize the behaviors here. Navigation, again. I'm going to skip that for a second. Fonts and colors is kind of cool. If you want to change the way your fonts look in your editor, you want to change your theme. Like right now, I'm kind of in a light theme. You can change your theme in the background to make it look the way you like, and so on. If you like a dark theme, and I see that you've already done that, that's totally cool. But you're going to have to do that every time because it's in your virtual machine. If you're okay with that. For me, a white theme is easier for me to teach to, so that's why I use a white theme. I like a dark theme as well, but that's just the way it is. Text editing. Again, this is where you're turning your line numbers and everything else. Key bindings. If you want to make your own key code for stuff, you can certainly make your own key binding here. for different kinds of events, and there's different kinds of things for the menu, for the file menu, to make your own shortcuts. Source control. Yeah.
Is there a Mac equivalent to Alt-Tab?
Alt-Tab. Command tab.
Does it work?
It would be like F4 or F3.
Source control. Here's something. Source control. We're going to be doing source control today. That's one thing I'm going to be doing that's outside of the book, because you need to know how to make your own use source control for your stuff. And it's actually really cool. It's built into Xcode, so it doesn't take a lot of work for us to set up a GitHub repository online and then connect to it. So we're going to talk source control, and there's some options here for source control. Downloads, remember I talked about some stuff that I didn't download? If you click downloads, you'll see that you should have some kind of simulator. iOS 9.1 is what I have. Hopefully you'll have that too. And I have myself, I've included Xcode 7.2 documentation, but I don't think I've included any other documentation for you here. Okay, and that's a problem. So you'd have to click on one of these ones. I wonder why they took that off. They may have taken that off.
We should install a 9.1.
I would install the simulator. It's going to take some time.
What have you downloaded?
And hold on a
What's the
second.
password?
Should be student.
What do we click to?
Okay. Hold on. Student. Should be student. Lowercase student. That's weird. Maybe it's Jordan College. It's something like that. Seriously.
College George Bliss. Attack it. Let's go, Brad. Everybody.
So we don't have the 9.1 simulator. What's password for students?
I'm curious.
What's the password for students?
That's weird. You know, you always get into these hiccups when that's okay.
The password is.
It doesn't work. The password, I don't know why. I think it's been really weird. But that's okay, because I can always give another version of stuff to Rick, and then he can fix it, right? So worst case scenario. Okay, so that's a kerfuffle. Let's go into location. Location is from a location perspective, you can click that in source trees. Again, it depends on how you want to get your sources for your data when you build your stuff. Notice on my command line tools show Xcode 7.2. You can also load up other kind of command line tools as well. It's good that we checked that. Better now than later. How about that? Okay. That'd be bad when we come to the class where I actually have my stuff. So if I was going to deploy, notice how I have my deployment up here where it says my project up here, and then my target is iPhone 6 Plus, 6S Plus. Right? You should have that on the top of your editor as well. If I click the plus button or this play button right now on the top, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to build the app. The build's going to succeed, right? And that's probably where you can stop. It won't actually deploy a simulator. It does? Oh, good. Okay, great. So then we have no problems. Who cares? Right? And that's what we want. We want the iOS 6S Plus simulator to come up. It'll take some time, guys. So it does work. It's locked. I don't care. If I don't have to bug him, I don't want to bug him. Right? Yeah, mine's going to take some time to come up. Well, actually, it's working. This is the app, right? It's nothing. It's a blank app, so that's why it's blank, right?
So weird change to 6S Plus.
So, well, the reason why it's this big is because it's, it's as wide as you want to make it, right?
Really high resolution.
Yeah. So this is my Safari app, and then your app is going to appear here. So you're going to see all your apps like really massive like this, right? But again, if you go to hardware, if I'm not wrong, you can reduce the size of your device, make it like a lot smaller. In here, you can change your view for your simulator.
Get your window.
Yeah, there's your scale. So if I go to scale, and if I go if I scale it down to, let's say, 33%, it'll look something like this more reasonable. right? So, I mean, you have your app, and if you notice, that was my app that I made just now. This demo app that we made, right? This COMP3025 app right here with there's nothing in there, if you notice, right? There's also some other apps here, and if you notice, all we did was we went to Window and went to Scale and changed it to 33%. Okay, so check this. We do have an app. We don't have a simulator that we can use for sure. That's good. Okay, now that I've run the simulator, if I want to deploy again to the simulator, I'd have to press this play button again. Let's stop the simulator. If I stop the simulator, it'll finish. Right? We want to try and finish the simulator after we've run it. Right? When we click the actual play button, what's really happening is it's building, it's compiling and building your code. Right? So if it doesn't compile and build, it's probably because some kind of errors are happening. You've done something wrong, or you haven't followed along properly. Okay. So that's really the compile and build. So again, on the left is your project navigator. In the middle is your editor. And again, the second file we're looking at is view controller Swift. Let's try a couple things here. Notice how we have in our there's a couple of functions that we can override. One of them is view did load. So this is going to trigger, this function is going to trigger this method when the view, our screen, loads for the first time, right? That's what's going to happen. So if I was actually to go in here and put in our first Swift command, which is going to be print. Yeah, I know it's heavy duty, print. And if you notice, when I start typing Swift, right? If I start typing print here, I get all this code hinting coming up, right? This code hinting that tells me, hey, what are you looking for to print? And typically there's a ton of different overrides here you can choose from. I want to print a string, so I'm going to use that one, and I'm going to say something like, my view did load, right? So I'll say view did load. So we know that when this fires, it's good. Notice how in Swift there are no semicolons. It'll accept them, right? That's the first thing you're going to learn about Swift. Hint, hint. That'll be on your test next week, right? No semicolons in Swift, right? If I put a semicolon in here, it's not going to complain though, eh? If I put a semicolon in. So if you're someone who forgets and because we're all coming from a C influenced background, and you put a semicolon, don't worry, it's not going to like kill you. Eh? It's not like it's not going to run or something. If I was to build this thing again, it'll run just fine.
So if you've got a long command,
you can put a semicolon in to separate it if you want to.
Is there a continuation? Let's say you want to put, because I assume it then, if you write 3 lines of code, it interprets them as 3 separate commands.
Correct. Then you can put a semicolon.
What if you got one really long command? How do you continue?
Put a semicolon. Yeah, that's when you use a semicolon. It doesn't ask you to use semicolons, but if you, it'll ignore it until it doesn't. If it doesn't recognize that command, because you can do command chaining as well, right? So if it knows that did it freeze? What you said?
I think
it'll take its time. It'll get there. Just give it a chance.
It's spinning.
Give it a chance. You can also do a force quit, and we'll talk about that. All right. So here's my print command. Let's do another print command down here and see what happens when we build this thing. So I'm going to do a print command. Did receive memory warning. Well, I'm never going to get a print receive memory warning, right? So I don't think I want to do that there. What if I just destroy this function? What if I kill this method? Can I do that? Let's try it. So I'll just kill this method. I'll just kill it, and I'll save. Right? So all I have here is my view did load, right? Okay, and let's run this thing afterwards. I'm going to run this now in the simulator. So I'm going to kind of press play. So all I've done is I've killed this method. I've put a print statement in, and I'm going to press play, right?
Are you afraid, Tom? Or?
No.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
All right, so here we go. We've got my app that came up, and then look, here's view did load. This is where the output is. Now you can change these output windows. As an example, like I can expand them, right, on the bottom. I don't know if you see that. There's these 2 little buttons here on the bottom that can expand or contract your output windows, right? That's where they are. So my view did load is right here, right? Notice how there's other buttons up here. Like one of the things with Xcode that I don't like is there's a lot of hidden stuff all over the place. Like it's not like how I'm used to a Visual Studio where you have kind of everything in one place, right? I mean, you have hidden windows in Visual Studio that you have to kind of bring up. But here in Xcode, if you see an icon, that means there's hidden functionality. Think of it as a tab as opposed to an icon. It actually does different stuff. So if I hover over something, as an example, this icon, what does it do? It collapses. This brings it up. I can pause execution. This is for my debugging down here, right? I can also expand or contract this windows the way So stop debugging, it's gone. And if you notice, my simulator stops as well when I stop debugging. It's still in the background running, but it stopped, right? Okay, so view did load print for Swift. It prints out to the console. We're going to use print a lot, right? Because we're going to use print for our debugging, right? We're going to use print to debug our problems, right? Just like we do console.log or system, basically we're printing out for Java. My mind is crazy. System.out.println and and so on, right? Console.writeLine in C#. Thank you. My mind is a blank today. All kinds of other stuff that we do. We always use print commands. Console.log for JavaScript, right? I use a lot of that when I do my development. I'm not sure about Rich how you do it, but I do a lot of console outs, right? I do a lot of that to kind of know what I'm doing, right? So
I tend to use the breakpoints and evaluate
right.
stuff.
Breakpoints are pretty like another way definitely to step through stuff, and we're going to talk about debugging and error management later on. Okay, cool. So print commands. I know we're going slow, guys, but bear with me. On the top, notice how we have one view controller.swift, and on the top we have a bunch of other windows here. One of them is show the standard editor. This one here, where we're at right now. If I click this one, right, and this is show the assistant editor, what it's going to do is going to split my editor into two panes. Okay. So what would I want that? Well, sometimes what I want to do is, what if I click on app delegate, right? I can see app delegate in this pane and in this one, right? It's not like it gives me different editors here, right? But what it does do is it allows me to change my assistant editor so I can look at the same file, and I can move it to the bottom or the right, and I can even change which editor I'm looking at right now, right? But just to know that you can split it up for now. So let's go back. And if I click X on the top right corner, it goes away. I can hide and show panes with this one. I'm not going to click this one for this one yet. This is the one we're going to use for our version control, which we're going to do in a second. So I can hide this pane, make it larger, bring it back, hide this one, bring it back, hide this one, bring it back. So you can really control your space. You can maximize the use of your space. So if you see me shifting things around, I'm usually using some kind of button to do that, to maximize our space for you guys to see things. Remember what I said, everything you click on is something that's going to give you some context. So for example, this, if I was going to click on the print statement here, if I highlight this, and if normally what I would do is get code hinting or some kind of documentation if I click this, the quick help inspector. And it's going to give me what this thing does. So here, you should get something like this. Inline, here's my quick help for this particular thing here. It tells me that, do you get it? You don't get it at all?
How do you control zoom on this thing?
Sorry?
How do you zoom in?
How do I zoom into what?
Like below the code. On
And you can scroll.
Are you talking about scrolling up the
Text size.
the text size? Okay. Sorry, I wasn't sure what you meant. Yes, command scroll will do it. So if I go scroll in and out. But preferences would do it the way, if you want to make it permanent, the preferences is where you do it. Okay, so here, let's go back to this. So then again, if you've downloaded the documentation, this is what you're going to get. So if I click on something, you're going to get some context-sensitive help. So for example, if you notice here, if I've got the question mark highlighted, right? The question mark is actually quick help inspector for each class or object that I'm looking at. So here's this function, view did load. If I click onto there, all of a sudden I get a quick help of what this thing does, right? Why is this method around? What does it do? And it tells you, called after the controller's view is loaded into memory, right? Because like all application development, and by the way, some people might say, well, how come we don't learn Swift first, right? Because we're not really using Swift 100% in this course, right? We're using Swift and we're using the Apple SDK, right? The UI kit as an example. So it's kind of we're using an API again, right? So even though you can learn some Swift and you can see some syntax differences with Swift and what we had before, truly at the end of the day, we're not really using full Swift here because we're using the API. And we have to know the API. And part of the first thing that loads in our API is this view did load. And so we're going to need to know the whole event loop, if you will, for our application development. Actually, we did that for people who had me with advanced Java. We did a little bit of Android development. And Android has its own loop. Stuff that happens right away, right? Same thing with iOS. iOS has its own event loop, if you will. And each of these functions run in the background, whether you override them or not. Okay, so let's take this function away. Let's see what happens if we just kill this view controller so there's nothing in it. Let's get rid of this function too, right? or this method. We can't get rid of view controller itself. We need this, right? But let's just get rid of the functions and see what happens, right? So now I don't have anything in there. Will it still run, right? So build succeeded. Everything's good, and I still get my device, right? Everything comes up with a kind of a bare minimum thing. So really, if you notice, because those two methods are methods you can override, you don't need them, right? You can decide which of those methods you want to trigger and what you want those methods to do for you. So if you want to wait when view did load to produce a message, or populate something on your iOS app, there's different events that we're going to use for that, and we're going to detail that throughout the course. Which event to use to do what? Okay. So a little bit of scripting. Okay, what about the main storyboard? We haven't touched that too much, and this is where all the fun happens and the pain for all of us developers for iOS. So let's click on this one, main storyboard. Okay, main storyboard. We have a couple things that happen in the main storyboard. And I'm gonna open this up for you guys so you can see it here. Now you guys should see what I see, but I'm gonna kind of make it so that you can see this main storyboard first. So you guys should see something like this. It almost looks like a view, if you will, of our iOS device, right? Here's our view. Okay. And that's pretty much in a nutshell. It is, we use storyboards in iOS in order for us to create a story, a user story, if you will, for when the user accesses our app. Consider each view a screen. So if I have a multi-view application, I have a multi-screen application in iOS, right? Okay, and what we're going to be doing today is we're going to drag and drop some stuff from our library. And by the way, remember we talked about this inspector is context sensitive. So if I go back to this one, it shows me some details about my view that we see here in our storyboard. On the right, notice that there is this area down here, right? And down here we have our library of all of our objects, our view objects. So every time we have a view object, I can drag and drop certain view objects onto my view to make them work. There's like example, it would be similar to us dragging and dropping controls in Visual Studio, right? When you're building Visual Studio windows from the right onto the desktop. So let's try that. So let's kind of go down and let's look for a label like this one, right? So if you you have to have this icon selected, show the object library, right? And I want to take a label and I want to drag it onto my view like this. So I'm going to drag it on. Notice how it glows blue. Let me show you that again. So if I take my label and I kind of drag it over here, it glows blue because there's a container, this view controller container that kind of exists here. So here, I'm going to put my label kind of somewhere in the middle, like right here. All right, so here's my label. It's in the middle of my screen. And you know what? When I click on this thing, notice how my label is highlighted. And on the right, I should have a context-sensitive menu about what I can do with my label, yeah? Well, there's different options up here. One is, if I hover over, show the file inspector. I don't want to look at the file inspector. This is the quick help inspector. Here is the identity inspector. Let's click on that. And if you go to the identity inspector, you can see that there's different other options here that you get for your label, right? Accessibility and so on. This is the one you really want, though. If you click this one, the attributes inspector in the middle, the one that looks like a little shield, right? If you click that one, you can actually see that you get the text, what kind of text it is. I want you to play around here. I want you to change the text of your label, make it your own. And I want you to try this out, just intuitively. Make this label say hello world, right? Because this is like our hello world program here, right? So see if you can do that. And there's a couple ways to do that if you try and check this out. So notice how for those of you who don't know what to do, notice how the text is plain, and underneath the text plain, there's label, and it shows label over here. If I change this to hello world, would that change everything? And the answer is yes, but what happens to my label is it's hidden. Because my label right now, what's happening is it has a certain shape to it. I have to expand it so that it can hold my, kind of my text here. And I can also choose if my text is centered within the label and so on. So I made my hello world text. Notice how I'm not getting any kind of help in terms of where I'm putting this thing. And when I position it though in the middle, if I want it to be exactly in the middle, I get this guide. So I get this guide, and as I come down, if I want to put it in the exact middle of my screen, I come to the middle point where I get two guides that kind of cross over. like this. This is my hello world. And if I want to make this big, my font, right, as an example, so I want to change my font size, I could certainly change that. I can say, well, right now it's my system font, whatever it is. I can change, if I have a collection of fonts I want to use, I can certainly use them here, a custom font or whatever. Or I can change my style or my size of my font. So if I want to make this, I don't know, like 30, notice how it changes right away. Press done. And if I expand this, now it's quite big, 30 pixels or 30 point. How is this going to look on my device, though? Right, here's my hello world. I want this hello world to populate on my device. And you know what? I want to change the color of this thing. Instead of my color being black, I want to change my color to something like blue. Well, if I choose the color palette right here, I could choose a color that I like. Like, I don't know, if I like more of a darker blue color like this one, I could change my color to apple blue, this aqua color, right? Yeah.
I notice Apple doesn't have Comic Sans as a test.
Well, there's again, you can include any font you want with it. It really depends on what I've loaded in your VM. You can certainly install that if you want. Go ahead, install it. Right? All right, so here's my hello world. Hey, let's see how this thing, will this populate this thing online? Will it actually build? Let's see what happens, right? And this is where we get into a lot of fun, and this is where it's a good place to pause after this. So I want to show you what happens, right? Build succeeded, everything's nice, and then it populates, and my hello world is not in the center, it's way over here. How come?
Wow.
So why is that? Why is my hello world all the way on the right side? Well, because my storyboard is made to work on any device, and Apple is trying to make it so that it's responsive, right? So I might have different device sizes. Today, it's an Apple iPhone 6s that we're using, right? Tomorrow, it's going to be something else. Maybe there's going to be a different form factor, a different resolution, or whatever, right? So they've made it flexible, and it looks nice. You might think it's a flexible thing to do to kind of put together this system, but it's also, auto layout is one of the most challenging things we're going to learn this semester. So let's stop here. I'm not going to talk about what we're going to do here. We did our kind of hello world. Let's stop here. Let's get a bit of a break, some coffee. I'll give my voice a break too. And then we'll come back in 10 or 15, and we'll continue for the next piece, okay? You okay?